The following podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Alone in the Realm, a premium solo TTRPG podcast. I'm DV, your humble GM and adventurer. Alone in the Realm is a podcast where we let the dice drive the story, and we are along for the ride. No character is beyond death, and we let the dice lay where they fall. We'll be playing Mothership by Tuesday Night Games, and the slasher module, Vibechete by Joel Hines. I'm altering quite a few elements of both the hooks and the storyline to make it a little different from other Vibechete actual plays out there. Without further ado, let's jump into the plot. Let's set the scene. The chaos factor is 7. I considered lowering it to 6, but I think things are still outside of the crew's control. The crew must get to the north and south generators simultaneously and manually start them both up. Let's test the expected scene. D10 equals a 1. Altered scene. I'll roll on the scene adjustment table in Mythic. Another D10 gives me a 6. Add an object. I want to roll on the object table. I get powerful. I'll roll on the meaning tables and I get flee and energy. Okay. To me, this means the object will have something to do with the slasher's teleportation. Mythic fate check. Does the slasher recover enough to be able to teleport away from the crew in the control room? Very likely. I get a 52. Yes, normally the slasher can't teleport away in the rules if the PCs are looking at him, but I think maybe they will all get distracted with their tasks. Let's see how this plays out. Ollie immediately runs over to Rowena to check on her, but he quickly confirms she's dead. He straightens up her contorted body and lays her out as if she were in a horribly mangled sleep. Ada continues to work on her PCT and with her tools to remove the logic core from Miss K from the server cabinets. As she does so, Miss K continues to escalate her panic.
Please, my dears, do not do this. Don't deactivate me. Please, I beg of you to reconsider.
Meanwhile, Therese starts using one of the hand welders to try to cut a hole into the blast door covering the exit. Denzel goes over to the door control panel and begins to poke around in the menus to see if he can get it open via the controls. Mythic fate check. Does Miss K offer to open the doors if they will spare her? Likely. I rolled a 60. That's a yes. Ollie moves from Rowena over to the slasher and begins to scan him for life signs.
This thing is dead. Again. I know, that's what we thought the last time.
And he takes out his sample kit and uses the scalpel to remove a piece of the thing's flesh for further study. This nanomachine technology might be some sort of a breakthrough.
Please, my friends, I feel like things have gotten out of hand. If you promise to spare me, I will open up the doors for you. I'm sorry baby boy and you had a little tussle, and your friend got hurt. He's very temperamental, you know. Please.
Miss K's sweet voice rises to a shrill shriek at the end. Then she goes eerily silent. Mythic fate check. Does Denzel agree and leave Miss K? Nearly impossible. After she sided with Baby Boy and tried to trap them, not to mention it was one of their goals to retrieve her core anyway. I rolled a 50. That's a no. Denzel and the others ignore the AI and continue their work. Ollie starts poking around at the control pad on the monster's arm, presumably part of the apparatus that handles the teleportation, but he can't be sure. I'll roll an intellect save with Ollie. He gets a 65 versus a 44, which is a fail. I'll use the OPSE failure move. D6, I get Foreshadow Trouble. I'll roll on the OPSE action and topic tables. I get Deceive Plot Arc. That seems obvious to me that the beast is going to awaken early. Denzel will do an intellect plus computer save to try to open the door. He gets a 90 versus a 52. Fail. Plus 1 stress. Denzel gets frustrated trying to open the damn door and he starts slamming the control panel with his fist. Therese momentarily stops cutting and glances over at him. She's never seen him lose his temper before. But it is completely understandable in this situation. Boss, this is going to take forever with this welder. I think I'm going to have to use the laser cutter. But it's the last charge in the thing. Denzel considers a moment, looking over at Ollie, stooping over the killer and poking around at his arm terminal. Yeah, go ahead. I want to get out of here in case this thing wakes up again. Therese nods and hands him back the welder. She takes out her laser cutter and starts blasting away at the door, encasing them. It is faster, but it will still take 21 minutes. Denzel walks over to Ada. How much longer for the core? I have almost completed the task, Denzel, she responds without looking away from her work. Denzel walks over to Rowena and takes her infrared goggles, her binoculars, and the hand welder. He looks around for something to cover her up with. He doesn't think they'll be able to take her with them. Mythic Fate check. Is there anything in the room he can cover her up with? I get a 15. That's an exceptional yes. In one of the cabinets near the servers, Denzel finds a fire blanket and a spare battery for the laser cutter. He takes out the blanket and covers up Rowena's still form. He lightly touches her forehead before laying the blanket over her. He feels like he failed the team. If only he had taken control of the situation at the lake, maybe this never would have happened. He tells Therese to take the spare battery he found for her laser cutter. Ollie make a speed save. He gets a 14 versus a 40. That's a save. Ollie swears he saw the killer's arm twitch as he was fiddling with the terminal on its wrist. He dropped it quickly and began to stand up when the thing's hand shot out to try and grab him. He dropped back on his back in his haste to escape, and he crawls backwards. "He's back!" he shouts. But before the others can turn around, the slasher touches something on his suit and disappears. Ollie was too shaken up to see where the trigger had been. "Damn it! I was hoping we'd have more time," Denzel shouts. Just then, Ada stands up with Miss K's logic core in hand. "Stand aside, Therese. I may be able to open the door now that Miss K has been deactivated," she states matter-of-factly. On the red terminal, only one word remains printed on the screen. "Please," all in caps. Suddenly, out of the control panel, 3 key switches rise up from covered holes on the panel. Beside them opens a cover over a big red button with a skull and crossbones on it. Ada make an intellect plus computer save. She gets an 87 versus 68. Fail. Plus 1 stress. She walks over to the panel and observes the 3 switches and the big red button. I cannot say with confidence, but I believe these buttons and switch most likely have a negative consequence if triggered. Denzel couldn't help but laugh. It seemed strange to do so in these circumstances, but still. I think you're right. Go check on the door. Ada nods and walks over to try and trigger the door open. She'll make an intellect plus hacking on the door. She gets a 59 versus a 73. Success. The doors slide open and Ollie says, "Thank the stars!" and he begins to walk out of the room. Denzel grabs his arm and reminds him that the slasher might be anywhere. Oh, right. Of course, how stupid of me. The remaining 4 crew members walk cautiously out into the access corridor. and discuss how they want to separate up and go to the north and south generators. Okay. Ada and I will go to the north generator. She'll have to do the cranking. I think my collarbone is hurt bad. Ollie, you and Therese will have to go to the south generator. It might be faster to cut across the park, but it's dark out there. At least in the tunnels we have some emergency lighting. Mythic fate check. Does Ollie decide to cross the park? Very likely. 61 is a yes. Ollie considers for a moment, then says,
I think we'll stick to the access corridors. Though, to be honest, I don't really want to go through that killer's lair again to get to the generator.
Yeah, on second thought, I think I'd rather go through the dark than go through that horrible place. Denzel nods, then hands over Rowena's infrared goggles. Take these at least. The cryo bay is between here and the north generator. According to the map, if we all go out to the copse, we could avoid it. I'm worried he might be in there, healing up, Denzel says, looking at each of them. If he is in cryo, we should go there first and finish him while he's frozen, Ada chimes in. Denzel considers this plan for a moment. Mythic fate check. Does Denzel agree they should all go to the cryo bay and confront the killer if he's there? Likely. I get a 59. That's a yes. Okay. Good plan. We'll all go to the cryo bay, make sure the killer isn't there. If he is, we'll try to kill him while he's frozen, or figure out some way to incapacitate him further. Agreed? Everyone hesitantly nods their heads and they begin to walk down the corridor amidst the creaking pipes, the cryo chamber. After a few moments, a burst of steam hisses out just as they're passing. I roll a 25% chance of the steam in the corridor and I get a 19. That's a hit. Who does it hit? D4? 3. Ollie. Ollie makes a speed check to try to dodge the steam. He gets an 81 versus a 40. That's a fail. Plus 2 stress. 1 for the steam, 1 for the failed check. The steam doesn't harm Ollie, but he definitely feels his heart leap into his throat when it suddenly hits him. They continue down the corridor until they reach the door to the cryo bay chamber. They look inside cautiously, and it's lit with blinking red lights. A mist of freezing nitrogen covers the floor from several open vats of the liquid. Lining the walls are rows of glass tubes containing shadowy figures. All of the glass is covered in condensation, and they cannot see who or what is inside of them. I'll roll an ambush score. We get a +1 on it, so that's a D10 +1. That equals 6. No slasher. Ollie walks carefully over to the first tube and wipes the glass to look inside. The person, he can't tell if it was a man or a woman, is so bloated and disfigured, is definitely dead. All of the vital signs on all of the pods show to be flatlined. Ollie make a fear save at seeing the dead body inside. He gets a 65 versus a 25. Fail. +1 stress. At this point, everyone is at 8, 9, and 10 stress. Ada's intellect, plus computers, to check one of the empty cryo bays that's left unopened. There's nanomachine dust covering the inside. Does she recognize it? 33 versus a 68. Critical success. I'll take -1 stress. While they're checking all of the pods, Ada finds one that is empty and open. A strange metallic dust covers the inside. Upon closer inspection and analysis, she recognizes that the dust is actually dead nanomachines. I posit this pod is where the slasher either heals now, or he used it to infuse himself with nanomachines. I am not certain. She looks closer at a mechanism connecting it to a small hatch in the floor. It also appears it is configured to be an emergency escape pod from this station. There is a coordinate pre-programmed inside of it. I will run it through my PCT. Mythic fate check. Do the coordinates come up with anything in her PCT? 21. Yes. After looking up the coordinates on her sector map, she looks at the others. Lord Wesley's Rise. Does that mean anything to any of you? Mythic fate check. Do any of the crew know what that means? Unlikely. I rolled a 72. That's a no. They all shake their heads. None of them have heard of it. They decide to look around and see if there are any medical supplies to be found here in the cryo bay, especially a stim pack or ossifenil, which heals broken bones. Mythic fate check. Do they find any supplies? I get an 8. Extreme yes. To me, that means they found both stim packs and ossifenil. How much? I'll roll a d6 for the stim packs and a d4 for the ossifenil. I get a 4 and a 3. They each take a stim pack and they put 2 doses of ossifenil into the medkit. Denzel takes the last dose. Make a body save against side effects. He rolls a 64 versus a 28. That's a fail. Plus 1 stress. I roll a d5 on the side effects table, and I get a 5. His teeth fuse into a solid bone ridge. Gross. Denzel takes the ossifenil and injects the pin into his shoulder near the painful fracture. He grunts as he feels the bone beginning to fuse. Then his groan turns into a roar as his bones begin to move and grow through the surrounding tissue. When it's finally over, his shoulder feels much, much better, and he notes that his teeth feel strange. He rubs his tongue over a solid bone ridge where his teeth used to be. Well, at least I won't have to floss anymore, he quips. This removes his 1 wound, but it doesn't restore his health. He's still at 7 out of 11 HP, but now he's back down to 0 out of 2 wounds. I'm going to increase the ambush score by another 1 because of all the noise Denzel made. The crew leaves the cursed cryo bay and moves the short way to the north generator room. There, they peek inside to check for the killer. The ambush score was 2, now it's up to 3 for Denzel shouting. I'll roll a d10 plus 3, that's a 7. No slasher. Therese and Ollie decide to depart and cross the park to the south generator. They kick out a ventilation panel and jump out into the surrounding forest. I'll split up the story to follow the 2 different parties. Since we know the slasher isn't in the north generator, we'll follow Ollie and Therese. They're leaving the north generator and will cut across the park to the south generator. Ollie has the infrared goggles and will lead Therese through the park to avoid drawing attention to themselves, hopefully. Ambush score is now 4. I roll a d10 plus 4. That's a 10. The slasher will appear somewhere in the woods. Enough time has passed for him to recover 1 out of his 6 wounds. Ollie leads Therese by the hand through the darkened woods. They do not dare turn on their flashlights for fear of drawing the attention of the killer. So Therese must place all of her trust in Ollie's guidance. He walks in a partial crouch, Rowena's pulse rifle raised and constantly looking back and forth at every little sound. Therese holds her laser cutter ready as well, though she can't really see anything in the darkened woods. The meager light of the red diodes in the dome cannot penetrate the shadows under the trees. After walking a few minutes, Ollie comes to a stop and whispers back to Therese. I think we've reached the rustic cabin on the map. Maybe we should circle out wide to avoid it? Therese pushed herself closer to the scientist, fear suddenly gripping her. Therese, roll a fear save, plus rim-wise. She gets a 5 versus a 37. That's a pass. Having another person nearby helps to quell the rising lump in her stomach, and she keeps her hand on his back as he skirts around the cabin. There seems to be an ambient light source of a sort emanating from the cabin, and they can hear something inside moving around. A snarl and a whimper suddenly erupts from within. Mythic fate check. Do the 3 wolves inside the cabin eating the synthesized steak buffet hear or smell the crew members? 73. Yes. Out of the cabin, a shaggy but very thin and malnourished wolf comes running with his tail tucked between its legs. It must have been chased off by one of the others trying to get their fill of the synth meat. It stops suddenly in its run and turns its toothy muzzle toward Ollie. It lifts its nose in the air, sniffing deeply. Then it lowers itself to the ground and begins walking slowly toward them to investigate. Ollie begins backing very slowly away from the beast and motions for Therese to begin climbing a nearby pine tree. Her boots scuffing on the tree spurs the wolf to action, and it raises its hackles and lets out a fierce growl. Mythic fate check. Does the wolf's growl draw the other two wolves from the cabin? 33? Yes. Since I rolled doubles, I also get a random event. I rolled a 100. Current context. I think that means the slasher also arrives. Two other wolves come racing out of the cabin and join the third as they run toward Ollie and Therese. Ollie begins to frantically clamber up the tree behind Therese. Ollie, make a speed check. 12 versus 40. That's a save. He climbs high enough just as the wolves arrive, so that when they leap into the air, their jaws snap at his foot, only to fall a few inches short. Therese and Ollie continue to climb just to get as much distance between them and the wolves as possible. Once situated in the branches as securely as they can, Ollie pulls the flare gun from his pocket that he found at the lake. He breaks it open and sees it only has one shot left. He aims at the gathered wolves at the base of the tree and fires. Ollie attacks the wolves with a flare gun, plus zoology. He gets a 57 versus a 54. That's a fail, plus 1 stress. Since he was so close to a successful roll though, I'll say that it successfully scares the wolves away. The flare bursts forth in a stream of red light, so bright that Ollie has to pull up his infrared goggles to keep from blinding himself. The burning flare lances down amongst the wolves harmlessly. However, they are startled by the sight of the flare and skitter several yards away from the burning light. As if summoned by the flare, the slasher walks from the cabin, Vibechete in hand. It walks calmly towards the wolves and the two crew in the tree. Therese notices the movement first and shines her flashlight on the moving figure. He's here! Ollie, make a fear save. 17 versus 25, save. Therese, make a fear save, plus rim-wise. She gets a 96 versus a 37, fail, plus 1 stress. The wolves see the approaching killer as well and they sprint away into the woods. They apparently have had negative run-ins with this slasher before. Ollie wastes no time and takes aim at the approaching man with the pulse rifle. Ollie attacks the slasher. 75 versus a 44. That's a miss, plus 1 stress. Therese attacks the slasher with her laser cutter, plus industrial. That's a 98 versus a 56. A miss, plus 1 stress. Both of the crew's laser weapons fail to connect in the darkness, and the figure continues to approach. As the flare begins to flicker out, Ollie lowers his infrared goggles once again. They probably only have time for one more shot before he makes it to the tree. He begins making some calculations as to how long they have before the slasher arrives. Ollie attacks the slasher with the pulse rifle, and I'm going to add his mathematics due to his calculations. He gets a 66 versus a 54. Apparently, he never was that good at math. He gets a critical failure, plus 1 stress. Ollie, panic check. Save. He passes his panic check. Therese attacks the slasher plus her industrial skill. A 47 versus a 56, a hit. She rolls a 1d50 damage and gets a 4. Yikes. The slasher is down to 21 hit points. Both Ollie and Therese take aim and fire almost simultaneously. Her laser cutter beam arcs dangerously close to Ollie's head, and he fumbles with his rifle, dropping it to the ground below. His shot fires harmlessly into the sky. He curses at her, but at least her shot landed and lanced through the killer's leg. It doesn't seem to slow him down as he continues to approach. Ollie pulls out his specimen tranquilizer gun, his only weapon that can shoot far enough to do any damage. The hand welder would not even be able to reach that far. Mythic fate check. Does the slasher try to climb the tree? I rolled a 92. That's a no. Without missing a step, the slasher swings back his Vibechete, and the humming blade blasts into the trunk of the pine tree, shaking it violently. Before Therese and Ollie can react, they hear a crack from below as the tree begins to fall over. Ollie, make a speed check to jump away from the tree and avoid fall damage. 99. Another critical failure, +1 stress. Ollie panic check, another save. I think that also means that the tree is going to fall on Ollie. He takes 2d10 equals 9 damage. He's got 8 hit points left. I'll make a body check to see if he's trapped, plus his skill in botany. That's a 21 versus a 33. Save. Therese will also make a speed check to jump without damage. She gets a 71 versus a 44. Another fail. +1 stress. Therese jumps away, but when she lands, she's hurt. She takes a 1d10, which gives her 9 damage. She has 8 hit points left. Ollie and Therese both try to leap from the tree as it crashes to the ground, but Ollie's foot catches in one of the branches, and it comes down with him entangled. He slams into the ground but is not permanently injured. Therese manages to clear the tree, but she lands hard on the ground and grunts from the pain of the impact. She too, however, escapes without a serious injury, but now the slasher is upon them. D2, who does the slasher attack? I get a 2. Therese. Slasher attacks Therese with his Vibechete. That's a 31 versus a 65. Roll 4d10 damage. That's a 19. 1 wound taken, with 7 hit points left. I'll roll a 1d10 on the wound table. That's a 9. Throat slit. Make a death save. I'll roll a d10 death save, and I get a 3. She's comatose. Only extraordinary measures can return her to the waking world. The slasher calmly walks over to where Therese rolls on the ground, attempting to regain her breath after it was knocked from her. Without any hesitation, he just reaches out with his Vibechete and touches the vibrating blade to her throat, and it erupts in blood. Ollie screams out in panic. Ollie, make another panic save. He gets a 3. A fail. He's jumpy. He gains 1 stress. Ollie screams out, "Therese, no!" And he frantically begins moving through the branches to try to reach his pulse rifle on the ground. Mythic fate check. Can he reach the rifle before the slasher gets to him in the next turn? I get a 71, yes. Much to his surprise, he's able to weave through the branches of the fallen tree, and the pulse rifle is right there at his feet. He picks it up and makes a mad dash away from the killer. He looks over his shoulder, and the thing is calmly walking after him. Ollie speed check. 54 versus 40. Another fail, +1 stress. Ollie races through the trees, and while he's looking back, he stumbles over a root and tumbles to the ground. He can hear the footfalls of the killer behind him, so he rises to a knee, takes aim, and fires. Ollie attacks. That's a 19 versus a 44, a hit. 3d10 damage is a 9. That brings the slasher down to 12 hit points. The pulse rifle blast slams into the center mass of the killer, and it stumbles a little, then resumes its steady walk toward Ollie. Mythic fate check. Is the killer now adjacent to Ollie in order to attack? Likely. I get a 49. That's a yes. The slasher attacks Ollie. I roll an 83 versus a 65. That's a miss. The slasher's blade whistles toward Ollie, and the scientist throws himself to the ground in time for the blade to pass harmlessly over him. He rolls over and raises the rifle at point-blank range and fires. Ollie attacked with advantage due to being at point-blank range. I rolled a 1 and a 14 versus a 44. That's a hit. 3d10 damage equals 26. Slasher is once again, quote-unquote, dead. The shots ring out in the night, and the laser pulse rises through what passes for a chin of the creature and out the top of his head. It falls to its knees, then over to the side. Ollie wastes no time checking for life. He runs over to Therese and looks through her pack. She has some camping gear in there, and he uses some of the material to fashion a crude bandage for her throat. He then injects her with her stim pack. It doesn't revive her, but he hopes that it will at least help close the throat wound long enough for her to live. He throws his rifle onto his back with a strap, and he lifts Therese in his arms. She's surprisingly heavy, so he shifts her into a fireman's carry across his shoulders. He just hopes that doesn't aggravate her bleeding. He looks over his shoulder at the creature and starts to move slowly towards the south generator. Mythic fate check. Does he make it to the generator without being attacked further? 59. That's a yes. After what seems like forever, but was likely only several minutes, he arrives at the door in the access tunnel that's marked for the south generator. He opens it up and moves inside. He lays down Therese as carefully as possible, and he sees the power indicator suddenly rise to midway. Ada must be on the other generator turning the crank. He hurries over to the crank and does the same. He pulls on the crank with all of his might, and it begins to slowly turn and build up momentum. He finds it begins to move easier as it speeds up. Before long, the power gets to 75, 85, 95, 100%. The generator whirs to life, and he can see light pouring in from the artificial daylight outside. Ambush score increases by 1. I'll roll a 1d10 plus 1. That equals a 9. Barely. No slasher. Ollie picks up the comatose Therese and hurries down the corridor to the docking bay. He pokes at the door controls and the blast doors hiss open, revealing the bay with the ship sitting pretty and undisturbed. He's never been so happy to see that salvage scow. Ada cranks on the mechanism for the third time, still hoping the other team will be at the generator soon. And just like that, the generator spins up, providing the much-needed power to escape this hellhole. Denzel gives a whoop of glee and embraces Ada. She looks very uncomfortable with the human interaction. "Let's get out of here," he says with a slight lisp, due to his teeth being a bony ridge now. They grab their gear and move down the access tunnel toward the docking bay. Ambush score is now 2. We'll roll a 1d10 plus 2. That's a 4. No slasher. They run as fast as they can through the access corridors, not being as cautious as perhaps they should be. They are too excited that the doors will be opened at the docking bay. Luckily, they see no sign of the slasher and are soon at the docking bay. The doors are already open, hopefully with Ollie and Therese inside. They move cautiously through the disgusting docking bay toward the ship. Ambush score is now 3. I'll roll a 1d10 plus 3. That's a 9. Barely no slasher. They board the ship to find Ollie desperately trying to tend to a bloody and unconscious Therese. She unfortunately was their pilot, but Ada can at least fly the ship, just not with any real skill. Denzel moves over to assist Ollie while Ada preps the ship for departure. The gangway is retracted and the exterior hatches are sealed. As Ada fires up the systems, the engines come alive with a familiar and comforting whine. "How is she?" Denzel says as he helps Ollie place a proper bandage over her ruined throat.
She's not responding, but her vitals are stable.
Ollie responds as he looks at the rudimentary med bed available in their ship.
If we can get her back to Hasmo's sea station, she'll probably recover, though I don't think she'll have the same singing voice.
Denzel frowns at the crude joke, then washes his hands before joining Ada in the cockpit. As he sits in the co-pilot chair, Ada states, "All set, Denzel. Ready for takeoff?" Denzel shouts back for Ollie to take a seat and gives Ada the thumbs up. The ship shudders as it takes off from the station and moves out of the sphere of influence of its artificial gravity. Denzel turns on his captain's log and begins to record everything that happened. A Hasmo security team will likely be dispatched, no doubt, to clean up this mess. At least they didn't have a complete failure and were able to retrieve the AI core, as well as the samples Ollie had gathered. The ship spun up its engines as it approached full burn toward the Hasmo station. Outside on the landing struts, a tattered vac suit with a bubble helmet was catching a ride to a new place. A place that hopefully has a lot of hands. That's it for the Mothership Vibechete adventure by Joel Hines. I had a blast playing through this, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. We will be starting Season 2 of Gradient Descent with these same characters very soon, so I hope you will join me for that. Until then, I'll see you next time. Bye.